S browses through books in the library when Shazy sneaks up, covering his eyes with her wet hands, playfully asking him to guess who she is. S easily recognizes her as Sei, the only one who would pester him this way. He removes her hands, wiping his eyes dry. She glances at a book titled How to Communicate and hands it to him with a smirk, teasing him about his interest in communication skills. S explains he's trying to improve his relationship with Akan. The book suggests building connections through shared activities, so he plans to invite Akan for an outing. S approaches Akan later, asking if she's free after school since Age is busy with work. He suggests they go shopping together. Surprised and flustered, Akan hesitates, nearly blurting out, "A date?" He quickly pulls her aside to avoid drawing attention, clarifying that it's just shopping because they're out of groceries. She reluctantly agrees, half smiling to hide her blush, insisting to herself that it's definitely not a date. Despite their nerves, they're determined to keep things casual. As they consider a meeting spot, they decide to meet by the back gate to avoid misunderstandings. After all, there's nothing romantic between them. They're just married out of obligation. Akan heads toward the gate, but before she can slip away, H spots her and offers to go home together. Caught off guard, Akan is torn between her friend's invitation and her promise to S. H notices her hesitation, teasingly guessing she's meeting Sedok and suggesting she tag along to make it a group outing. Uncomfortable, Akan awkwardly excuses herself and rushes off, determined to keep this shopping outing private. On her way, she accidentally steps on Sha, who is lying on the floor, setting a playful trap to get Akan's attention. Sha insists Akan choose between bizarre options: world domination, copying sutras, or exterminating bullies. Completely baffled, Akan escapes, brushing it off as a weird interruption before finally reaching the back gate, where she waits for S, convincing herself again that it's just shopping. Meanwhile, S worries that Akan might have gone home already, considering she dislikes him as much as he dislikes her. Still, a small part of him hopes she waited. When he arrives and sees her there, he's surprised, even noticing how the scene around her almost seems to glow. They head out to a small, tidy store near Akan's home, popular for its affordable prices. Inside, S begins tossing random items into the cart, but Akan stops him, instructing him to check prices carefully. She points out cheaper eggs, explaining that they're a better choice for budgeting. As she puts back the pricier items, he's struck by her attention to detail and frugality. To S, her strictness about small price differences seems excessive, but Akan insists that managing expenses wisely is essential for a good life. The two then spot a crowd of housewives gathered at a meat counter, eagerly awaiting a sale. S, uninterested, suggests they skip it since they already have meat at home, but Akan, excited by the bargain, heads into the crowd, hoping to stock up and freeze it for later. However, she returns empty-handed, having been pushed aside by the determined shoppers. Not wanting to give up, S decides to try his luck, thinking the women might make room for a student. But as the bell rings for the sale, he too is trampled by the enthusiastic crowd, and both he and Akan end up lying on the ground, defeated but laughing at themselves. As they laugh, Akan playfully declares they'll win next time, and though S feigns reluctance, he's already thinking about another outing. On their way back, he compliments her shopping skills, hinting that she'll make a great wife one day. Blushing, Akan reminds him that they're technically already married. Embarrassed, they both look away, feeling the tension but unable to make eye contact as they walk home together. The next morning, as S wakes up, he finds Akan asleep with her head resting on his chest. He's stunned. Akan had warned him that if he ever touched her, she'd break his fingers. She's clutching his shirt, and he's frozen in place, careful not to move so she doesn't wake up. They're close, closer than he ever imagined. He finds himself admiring her soft, pale cheeks, thinking they look as delicate as marshmallows. He pokes her skin lightly, and she stirs, briefly waking, only to settle back down on him. A few moments later, Akan wakes up fully and immediately recoils, accusing him of trying something while she slept. He quickly tries to clear up the misunderstanding, insisting he didn't do anything and only woke up right then. But she's unconvinced, giving him a skeptical glare. Knowing he can't escape this without apologizing, he bows his head, saying she looked so cute while sleeping that he couldn't resist touching her face. She's caught off guard by his admission, blushing, and asks just how cute he thinks she is. Embarrassed, he admits that if she looked any cuter, he might have lost control. He grabs a pillow and lies down beside her, just close enough to see her sleeping face more clearly. His heart is racing, and with each beat it feels harder to fall back asleep. Still, they both drift off, When the alarm rings, they wake up to gentle smiles and exchange soft good mornings, like two newlyweds savoring a peaceful moment together. Hess heads to the bathroom to freshen up, while Kan goes to the kitchen to start breakfast. Suddenly, Es hears Akan shouting from the kitchen, realizing she forgot to cook the rice and didn't place the grocery order. In her flustered state, she even burns the toast. Es wanders into the kitchen, grinning, and asks what's going on with her today. She seems a little off. Akan rolls her eyes and says it's not unusual to be a talented multitasker. Then she pauses, raising an eyebrow at him, and asks why he isn't wearing a shirt. He hands her his shirt, telling her to stop making breakfast before they burn the whole house down. They exchange an amused look, both knowing they're a bit of a mess this morning. She agrees, but adds to the chaos by saying she'll iron his shirt, though she nearly spreads butter on it by mistake. He chuckles and tells her to sit on the sofa while he tidies up the kitchen, then mentions they're already running late for school. With no time left for breakfast, they head out the door. As they pass a bakery, Akan's gaze lingers on the pastries in the window. He notices and asks if she's hungry. She nods, but they're cutting it close on time. Realizing she won't be able to focus with an empty stomach, he quickly ducks into the bakery and buys her a strawberry cream pastry. However, the pastry is much larger than he anticipated. She laughs, saying there's no way she can finish it on her own. He splits it in half, handing her one piece, and they share a bite, savoring the sweet start to their day. He takes a bite and comments that the cream tastes like it's mixed with red food coloring rather than real strawberry flavor. Whoever created it must not actually like strawberries, he jokes. She playfully lunges to grab the pastry back from him, saying that if he's going to be so picky, he doesn't have to eat it. But he holds it firmly, claiming it's his now since she gave it to him. They continue walking, each taking turns with the pastry. When she asks how he really feels about the taste, he grins and admits it's not the best. Still, they find themselves laughing, sharing bites of a cheap pastry while playfully critiquing it as they stroll along, enjoying the simple moment together. It's nighttime and Sidhu steps out of the bathroom to see the lights still on in Akan's study room. He heads over, curious, and asks why she's up so late. Akan explains that she's studying for an upcoming quiz, hoping to learn everything that might be on it. Recently, they haven't been arguing as much, and he's started to understand her better. Her feelings, her way of thinking, and her strong suit, her dedication to hard work. He shrugs and teases her, saying, "Who even cares about quizzes? It's the big exams that really matter." But deep down, he can't help admiring her commitment. He reminds her of how he scored well on a quiz just a few days ago. With a touch of pride, he boasts that he didn't even study. He just remembered everything that was taught, as if forgetting was the real challenge for him. Hearing this, Ain starts to tear up, feeling as though he's indirectly mocking Sayu for studying so hard. Sayu quickly backtracks, trying to reassure her that studying is tough, and it's impressive that she's putting in so much effort. But Ain, feeling frustrated, just pushes him out of the room, unwilling to listen. He had let his guard down, thinking things were going smoothly between them, but he still hadn't figured out what upset her or what she truly disliked. They'd both worked hard to get to this point, and if things kept up, they might end up clashing again. Searching for a way to make it up to her, he remembered her love for strawberry cake. He knocked on her door, offering a late-night treat, a strawberry sandwich he prepared. Expecting her to brush him off, he was surprised when she took the plate, though her expression was suspicious. She eyed him and asked if he was trying to be sneaky by making it for her. He quickly denied it, saying there was no hidden motive, but she didn't buy it. How could he be doing something nice for her right after snapping at her? He handed her the sandwich, casually saying it was just a regular sandwich. She could eat it or toss it if she didn't want it, and then he went back to his room. She placed the sandwich aside, skeptical but intrigued. The fact that he'd gone out of his way to make her a snack, even after their argument, felt strange and hard to believe. After a moment, curiosity got the best of her, and she took a bite. The taste was surprisingly good, and before she knew it, she had finished the whole thing. She wondered if he'd made it because he remembered she liked strawberries, or maybe as a quiet way of making peace. A warm, fluttery feeling rose in her chest, a comforting sensation that left her a bit restless, but not in a bad way. With renewed energy, she returned to her books, ready to pull an all-nighter for the quiz ahead. Dan and Kane walked together to grab lunch at a nearby cafe, but halfway there she nearly fell asleep on her feet. Ammar advised her not to stress too much about her studies, pointing out that she looked pale and had been pacing around all day. But A was determined. She wanted to be top of her class, no matter the toll it took on her body. A, however, disagreed, saying her health mattered more than grades, and besides, she'd never beat S. That struck a nerve. An firmly declared that she would beat S, her enthusiasm both confusing and surprising H. With a fiery determination, she announced she'd do whatever it took to surpass S, even if it took years, vowing to make Sat acknowledge her as the best. As Sue walked by, Aim pointed her finger at him, warning him to get ready. Eating her strawberry pancakes, H continued the conversation with A. H admitted she couldn't study non-stop every day and often ended up watching videos instead. A looked a bit embarrassed, confessing that studying wasn't really her thing either, but now she had someone supporting her, even making her late-night snacks. H was taken aback, wondering if A had a boyfriend or if it was her parents. Ain shook her head, saying that wasn't it at all. H then made a face of sudden realization, asking if it was a housekeeper helping her out. Ain nodded, agreeing that it was indeed a good guess. They'd recently hired some help around the house. I couldn't believe CU had started supporting her in this way, and she was determined to make sure his efforts weren't wasted. Late into the night, Ain studied diligently while Sadhu quietly observed her dedication. One evening, he brought a strawberry cake to her room and found her buried in her books, staying up far later than she should. Despite needing to sleep by midnight, she pushed herself to stay up until 3 in the morning, determined to finish just 2 more pages before resting. Sadhu worried that this relentless studying was beginning to take a toll on her, feeling there's a point where too much effort starts to hurt rather than help. Night after night, he watched her follow the same routine, until one evening he found her asleep at her desk instead of studying. Concerned, he went to check on her and noticed her flushed face. Gently touching her forehead, he realized she was burning up with a fever. He helped her to bed and checked her temperature. It was a high 40 degrees Celsius, a serious fever that required immediate care. He gave her some fever medicine, and soon she began sweating, but he felt unsure about how to handle the situation. Trying to calm himself, he reminded himself that this was a king, someone strong, not the type to be taken down easily. Yet as time passed, his worry grew instead of easing. Her breathing became more labored, and the medicine seemed to have no effect on the fever. He started to wonder if she was dealing with something more serious. Even in her weakened state, she tried to get back to studying, but Sa gently stopped her, reminding her that her relentless dedication to her studies was exactly why she was in this condition. She often stays up late, but that doesn't mean she should push herself to exhaustion. She talks about her dream, a dream she's determined to achieve through hard work. She wants to become a doctor, someone who can quickly help those in pain. Her goal is to see the people she loves healthier and happier, but the cost of medical school is high, and they don't have much money. Her grandmother has even offered to cover her tuition fees. To her, this isn't just a passing ambition. It's a true purpose. Some adults might laugh at her dedication, but for A. Can, this dream is worth every sacrifice, every emotional struggle, even if it means giving up other parts of her life entirely. Sue sees himself and the girl as being on similar paths. He calls her lucky. She can mess around and still get good grades, while no matter how hard he tries, he just can't surpass her. He believes it all comes down to talent, and though it frustrates him, he can't help but admire her for it. Realizing he's voiced his thoughts aloud, he quickly tries to cover, saying he doesn't admire her but actually resents her. She asks, amused, if he really does admire her after all. She groaned in discomfort, and as he checked her temperature, he realized it was spiking. Just as he considered calling an ambulance, she stopped him, saying ambulances should be saved for people in true danger. To her, a simple fever was nothing but chills, and she wouldn't forgive herself if someone in need lost out because of her. He tried calling a taxi, but none were available. Either no one answered, or they were all occupied. The nearest hospital that allowed late-night visits was a 10-minute bus ride away, but the buses had already stopped running. She insisted she didn't want to worry her husband and had to be in school the next day despite her condition. He ignored her protests and gently lifted her in his arms. How could he possibly leave his wife in pain? He sprinted to the hospital, holding her close. She felt so fragile, her limbs almost as delicate as glass, her small frame a stark contrast to her usual fierce spirit. She was always so full of energy, her determination making her seem larger than life. But in reality, she was so vulnerable. They had never really talked about their dreams or future plans, but now he was starting to see who Akani truly was. If he lost her now, it would all end with him left in the dark, knowing so little about her. It would be like a story cut off after a single page, leaving him to wonder about the rest of the tale for the rest of his life. He genuinely wanted to know more about her. We see Sed sound asleep, and Ain comes in to wake him up, but Sed doesn't budge. Mumbling in his sleep, he mentions wanting a month off from school. To get him moving, Ain leans in close and says that if he doesn't wake up now, she'll get a frying pan involved. That jolts him awake, his face filled with terror, only to see Ain grinning and greeting him good morning. It's been a week since that night, and even though Ain is back to her usual annoying self, he finds himself feeling more at ease with her nearby. Their usual banter picks up again, with Ain nagging Sed about small things, like not washing his face yesterday because it was raining, and he figured the rain would take care of it. Heading to the kitchen to start breakfast, she tells him that washing your face is something most people do daily. Sed pretends to be shocked, joking that if he stopped being human, he wouldn't have to wash up anymore. Ain retorts smugly, saying he may be good at academics, but he's completely hopeless with basic stuff like this. Sed's eyes flash with mock offense, asking if she really has the right to criticize him. Ain doesn't catch his meaning at first, but then he grins and reminds her about something she once said about admiring him. Blushing, Ain tries to brush it off, saying he must have been dreaming. But Sed doesn't let it go, teasing that he even recorded it on his phone. Furious, Ain threatens to throw both him and his phone into a volcano. He tries to calm things down around them, but it only ends up making the situation more chaotic than before. While he sneaks into the bathroom, she's in the middle of rinsing her mouth. He decides to clear up her confusion, letting her know he was just joking about recording her earlier. Really, he's just there to ask what dressing she wants for her salad. She tells him, and he heads off, telling her to hurry up so they can eat. When Sue enters his class, Shoei immediately starts sniffing around him, curious if he's managed to catch anyone's eye. Picking up on the scent of Sue's breakfast, Shoei jokingly concludes that Sue had a date with fried eggs and bacon. He teases him about whether he skipped breakfast, though Shoei himself apparently didn't miss a meal either. Hearing this, the girls in class rope Shaz into joining them for breakfast next time. Just after class, Sedu runs into Himari, who greets him cheerfully as always. He's heard from Ain that she aced yesterday's test, and he can't help but admire her, calling himself an idiot compared to her. Giving her a thumbs up, he tells her she deserves a little respect for that. She laughs, calling him one of a kind and brilliant in his own way, though she teases that he's not always the quickest to catch on. She steps a little closer, and he feels his face heat up. Akan watches them from afar. He asks if he's blushing, and Andy quickly denies it, insisting he's not. Kan just chuckles, saying he's only teasing. Just then, Ain strides over with a piercing glare, making Andy freeze. Ain grabs his shirt, scolding him and reminding him that he already has a wife, so he can't just be hanging around with other girls like that. Both of them turn red with embarrassment. For a moment, it feels like old times, but something's changed. Andy's acting a bit off. Later, he heads to class, still flustered, where Mary asks if he's free to join her at the cafe again, and Andy eagerly agrees. Sitting there, Sa's heart races as he watches her. He can't help but think how adorable his wife is. In the morning, she serves him breakfast and asks him what he thinks of it. He feels like it's on a whole different level compared to any typical breakfast. It's far beyond what anyone would expect. She's trying to get him to admit defeat and acknowledge her skills, hoping he'll give in and submit to her. She thinks she might be catching a glimpse of his softer side, though it could just be her imagination. She then asks him what he meant the other day when he told her not to hang around with other girls. She wonders if there was some hidden meaning behind it. Embarrassed, he fumbles, dropping a bowl in his fluster. He tries to explain, saying that if Grandma saw him with another girl, she might cut off the funds for their wedding. He's a bit clueless, trusting everything Grandma says without really getting the hint she might be dropping. At school, he sees Ain running toward him, and for a second, he thinks his time is up. But Ain just hands him a lunchbox he'd forgotten on the table. With a smile, she tells him she put a lot of effort into making it, so he'd better enjoy it. He agrees, admitting that the sheer destructive power of her gaze is enough to make him forget she's technically his natural enemy. They walk to class together, and along the way, she mentions a sale on eggs at the supermarket. He doesn't get why they need to save money, given they're living off their grandparents' funds. She responds that when they're adults, they should learn to live on their own earnings. Impressed, he compliments her for being so earnest. As they approach the classroom, she casually remarks that, in a way, they're both outsiders here. At lunchtime, Shad shows up and tries to snag Sed's lunch. Sed pulls it back, teasing him about probably having had a huge breakfast, and jokes that if he didn't bring his own lunch, it's because he wanted to eat something made by He's about to say his beloved wife, but Sed cuts him off, begging him not to say that in class. Undeterred, Shaz strikes a pleading pose, asking for just a bite, which makes their classmates laugh. They start calling Sed heartless for not sparing even a bite. Feeling pressured, Sed glances over at Ain, holding up a single finger as if to ask if he can have just one bite. But Ain doesn't get the hint. Shaz finally looks over at Sed's lunchbox and notices that it looks exactly like Ain's lunch. Sed and Ain exchange surprised glances. Trying to play it cool, Sed explains that it must be a coincidence. But he isn't sure. The sides are arranged differently, but the contents are exactly the same as Ain's lunch. This surprise stirs everyone, and they start wondering if Ain actually made lunch for Sedu and whether they're secretly dating. Ain immediately shouts that they're not dating, and Sedu backs her up, though deep down, both are thinking of themselves as practically married. But their classmates aren't convinced and keep teasing them, saying they argue just like a married couple. Some try to compare their lunchboxes for evidence, only to find Sedu's is empty because Shaz has eaten everything. As the crowd disperses, Shaz grins, telling Sedu he should thank him for destroying the evidence. Later, in an empty classroom, Sed and Ain discuss what just happened. Ain admits she was careless. Aid is always quick to pick up on things. Still, they both agree they can't let anyone find out they're actually living together. Ain shivers at the thought, worried that if everyone found out they were married, they'd be outcasts, and who knows what would happen to their school records. They decide it's safer to eat in the cafeteria for a while. If people saw matching lunches again, their cover would be blown. And the worst-case scenario, people finding out they live together. Suddenly, they hear voices of students approaching the classroom. Panicking, they hide under the teacher's desk, pressed close together. The students are there to collect extra desks and chairs. They overhear the students talking about moving the teacher's desk, and both of them freeze, realizing how awkward it would look if they were found like this. Rumors of them dating would spread through the entire school like wildfire. Fear and worry fill the air. Just as one student moves to grab the teacher's desk, Himari tells him that it's pretty heavy and suggests he grab one from the next classroom instead. Once the students leave, they finally crawl out from under the desk. They decide it's best to leave the room separately, spacing out their exits. Ain goes first, and after a few minutes, Sedu follows, planning to take a longer route to avoid any chance encounters. As he heads out, he runs into Himari, who almost trips but steadies herself just in time. Sedu warns her to be careful running on the stairs, to which Himari playfully replies that she feels safe as long as he's around to catch her. Flustered, he quickly assures her he won't always be there, then dodges away with a shy but determined look. The conversation makes him remember, and he asks if that lunch really wasn't made by Ain. He lies to Himari, saying it's just a coincidence that they ended up with the same meal, though he knows Ain might have tried to match his lunch on purpose. Himari, with a curious, almost interrogative look, asks again if he's sure they're not dating. Ain reassures her, and Himari looks genuinely pleased with the answer. She apologizes for the strange question and promises to clear things up with everyone else. As she leaves, he sighs, knowing that since Himari is so popular, everyone is bound to believe her. Finally, a bit of peace returns to his life. During lunch, Himari brings up the topic of Sedu, asking Ain what he thinks of her, confessing that she actually likes him. Ain's face instantly turns puzzled. S sits on the sofa, reading quietly in an empty room, but he senses someone watching him, drawing closer. It feels like a horror scene, and it's driving him crazy. Suddenly, Ain appears right in front of him, holding a pen as if it's a weapon. With a notebook in hand, Ain asks what he's up to. S brushes it off, hoping Ain will just go on with whatever he's doing, but Ain doesn't let it go. Instead, he starts teasing, calling S a professional monkey, joking that he should proudly stay in his zoo like usual without any shame. Ain claims he's just there to observe Sed and his so-called activities. The scene shifts to Ain having lunch with H. H asks Ain if he has feelings for Satu, but Ain denies it. He hasn't really thought about her that way. In fact, if she weren't around, he'd be at the top of their class. Ain questions why H would even ask, and H admits he likes Satu. Ain is puzzled. What's so special about Satu? H explains that he admires everything about her. He first noticed her during a track meet when one of their friends passed out from heat exhaustion. There was no nurse around, and people started to panic, but Satu stepped in, calmly taking charge like a true leader. She always seems calm, but in that moment, she was as poised as royalty. That's her strength. She's reliable, unlike anyone else. Ain appears to agree, recalling a time he was ill and how Sadhu stepped up to help. Ain then adds that he lacks confidence himself, which only makes him admire Sadhu more. Ain agrees again, realizing she is genuinely kind-hearted. Though she's usually blunt, whenever she sees H feeling down, she'll quietly offer him candy and ask how he's doing. Ain can't help but feel a little frustrated, noticing how much H knows about Sadhu's compassionate side. These little gestures feel like they belong in a world beyond his own experience. Aid wants Ain's help, knowing Ain and Sed get along well, and hopes Ain can support him in winning Sed's heart. Ain quickly protests, saying they don't really get along, they barely talk, and mostly just argue. For Hamari, Ain, and Shaz, Sed is the only one who speaks to them normally. Still, H asks Ain to help make Sed fall for him. Ain falls silent, realizing he doesn't have a reason to say no. His marriage with Sed is in name only. They're bound together purely to pursue their dreams. Not only can he hardly imagine a future where he truly cares for her, but it's also not his place to control her love life, and above all, he'd do anything for his best friend. So Ain eagerly agrees to help, though he has no idea how to go about it. H then eagerly presses for more. He wants to know everything about Sed, what she loves and what she can't stand. Ain wonders if he really knows Sed well, even though they live together. The scene shifts to the present, where he's chasing her, notebook in hand. Sed dashes into her study, clearly avoiding him. He can feel her intense, almost intimidating energy. He starts to think he's beginning to understand Ain's feelings for her, but realizes he may have gotten a bit overconfident. As Sed looks out the window, she spots Ain lurking nearby, almost like he's studying her. Later at dinner, he awkwardly brings up the topic, asking her what type of girl she's into. She's caught off guard, wondering if he could be interested in her, but dismisses the thought. Ain would be the last person to have romantic feelings for her. In response, she shrugs and tells him she doesn't have a type. Ain pulls a face, teasing her, saying she'd probably be fine with anyone, even a guppy fish. She stares at him in disbelief, astonished he could even imagine a guppy fish as female. He asks her about her favorite foods. She starts talking about various fancy dishes, and Ain thinks she's a bit extravagant, especially for a student. But it turns out she wasn't treating herself to these meals. Her grandfather used to take her to different places to try them. After her elementary school graduation, her grandfather even flew her in a helicopter to a graduation party. She remembers meeting a girl at that party who made the otherwise dull event enjoyable. She got so caught up talking to this girl that she forgot to ask her name, but she can still picture her angelic smile. Ain keeps asking about her favorite foods, and she starts wondering if this girl from her past would ever cook one of her favorite dishes for her. The thought excites her, and she can't wait for tomorrow to see what she might create.